Greetings and welcome to this episode of Everyday Enchantment. This day is going to be incredible and amazing because I have with me today Amy English, who is going to jam with me about how to feel more comfortable in our bodies this summer, which gosh, I can't wait for this conversation. I want to know all the juicy intel that Amy has that we're going to be talking about today in the next 30-ish minutes. And before we kind of jump in, because I could easily dive into this topic, as everybody knows, it's one of my favorite things. I want to introduce and share a little background about Amy. So she is a certified food and body confidence coach. Yeah. With a specialty in emotional eating, which I mean, is not the whole planet emotionally eating. I think probably
Yeah.
yes at some point. And you specialize in guiding women toward finding peace, which is such an important piece to me of enchantment with our bodies and creating healthy relationships. That like the food and the movement and all that doesn't come first. At least this is my understanding of your work in the world. It really becomes the like bonus result of when you find that comfort, when you really get into a different relationship with yourself, then the food and the movement kind of fall in place. So tell me what you think about how I interpreted that. And I would love to hear anything else you want to share with the listeners today about kind of your own journey and how you found yourself to be this type of coach.
Oh yeah. Well, that was perfect, by the way. And
Okay.
it is. It's like the freedom with food and with the body. It's like that after effect of you connecting with yourself. Like I
Yeah.
always say, it's like the first thing, the most important thing is becoming friends with you first and friends with your body. Like when I'm gonna get emotional. Okay, I didn't share that with you beforehand. I do. I get
No,
emotional. I always
I
say
love it.
crying. Crying is my superpower. But when I think back on my journey and the decades of dieting and
Mhm.
restriction and really just hating myself and my body, like I can say that I hated my body at a point. And
Mhm.
when I started to realize that the first step was to make friends with your body and learn to work with her and with yourself and start building that road to trust,
Mhm.
then everything started falling in place.
That's such a powerful thing. And so for people listening that are saying, okay, how do I make friends? I mean, that's a big pool. We could start at a
Yeah,
lot of places. Where do you
yeah.
start with that? How did you or how do you when you're working with clients, how do you help us start by I would call it befriending, which is the same thing, right? And befriending
Yeah,
our bodies.
yeah.
Where do you begin?
I always begin with food because most of the women who come
Mhm.
to me have the habit, like you said, of emotional eating. They
Yeah.
want to learn how to stop turning to food. And a lot of times what happens is like we just automatically turn to food and we've been doing it for a really long time. Like in my
Mm.
case, I was eating emotionally for over 30 years.
Yeah.
It started when I was a kid. And
Yeah.
that is most common with my clients. I always say it's between the ages of like 8 and 13 is somewhere when the habit of emotional eating started.
Interesting.
And that's actually where we disconnected from our body, right? And we
Mm.
started focusing, like we were just focusing on the food as a
Yeah.
way to soothe and as a way to comfort. It's like
Yeah.
we weren't taught how to connect with our bodies and how to
Yeah.
listen to our bodies and trust the gut instinct, right? Everything is the mind, the mind, the mind.
Yeah.
And you learn early on and you just start treating yourself quite harshly. And a lot of it, I mean, it comes from the conditioning, it comes from the things we see all around us, right?
Absolutely.
Especially women. And so food becomes this thing. Food actually becomes the friend. And that's what I found for me. Like food was my friend for a really long time. I
Mhm.
was teased and bullied about my body from a very early age. And so food actually kind of became that buffer for me. And so what I found with my clients, the women who come to me, that's they're very similar stories, different circumstances, but kind of
Yeah.
similar threads. And so we start with food and just understanding the role that food is playing. And through that process, we start listening, like paying attention to what, first of all, the thoughts that you're thinking, because we all know that those are not always helpful.
Right. No, I shouldn't eat. I'm just thinking about I'm thinking about all this in my like context of summer. And I practice the same principles as well too. But like even though I've practiced it a really long time, it's like, oh, I shouldn't eat ice cream sundae. I should get a kid size. I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't, right? There's all of that. And you're right, it's not neutral at all about food. It's
No.
all about all sorts of thoughts and message. And it creates so much to me mental energy that we spend. I
Huh.
mean, this is if you don't want to have a summer of fun, get all worked up about food in your body and, and be thinking about all of this, which is what I mean, you've done it for years. I've done it for
Yeah.
years. And I think it's why we both personally feel like, how do we help, again, the planet and particularly women, because we have been very much targeted. My family put me
Yeah.
on a diet at 8.
Yeah.
I look back at,
10.
I thought I was overweight. I look back at pictures now and I go, I was like a regular sized person.
Yeah.
I had no issues with my weight until they put me on the diet in the first
Yeah.
place. And then I got obsessed, to your point, about food because everything was, this is good. You're allowed to have this. This is bad. And to your point, then you start to, it becomes this kind of microcosm of how you see the world. There's a right way to be in the world. There's a wrong way to be in the world. Food becomes part of it, right? But
Yeah.
it's how you do everything almost. You start to live in these boxes and put all this energy into this rather than really thinking about what does my body need, and this goes back to what you said about trust, because I think that if we want to befriend our bodies, our lives, just even the sense of magic within us, this element of trust is at the foundation. How do we relearn or discover again or discover for the first time how to build relationships with ourselves that where we trust our own knowings over anything else. And it's funny because I was even saying that to you. I was sharing with Amy just about something personal in my own life coming up. And again, it triggers in me. It's like, oh, the experts or the doctors must know something always better than me, and I'm not doing it right. And I'm up in my head again.
Yes.
It's like might be a lifelong practice for all of us around just keep coming back to, you don't just build trust one time. Trust is an ongoing give and take with ourselves, with other people, with the world at large. And yeah. So tell me what you think. What's your wisdom about how you created trust with yourself?
Baby steps.
Mhm. Mhm.
Turtle steps, whatever we
Yeah.
care to call them. It doesn't all get solved in one big swoop, right?
Right.
It takes time, and it starts by, some of the turtle steps that I think of just on my own personal journey, and with the clients that I work with. It's like just noticing the things that you're thinking, the way that you're talking to yourself, because it's all connected, right?
Mhm.
One thing I like to talk about is, your inner ally versus your inner asshole. Like, who
Ooh.
are you being today to you?
To you, not to anybody else in the world, just to yourself. I love
Just to
this.
yourself, like
Yes, yes, yes.
noticing the way you're talking to yourself, the things
Mhm.
that you're saying about you, about your body,
Yeah,
about, what you want to eat, what you think you should eat, what rules you're following, things like
yeah,
that. It's like, what's the tone? When I started to notice the tone in which I was talking to myself on a
mhm,
daily basis, I
mhm.
mean, first of all, it broke my heart. Like, I would never talk this way to a
We're
loved
so
one.
mean to ourselves, like, we
So
would never do it out
mean.
most of us would never do that to anybody else.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. And so
yeah.
when and it's funny too, because I'm actually thinking of a real life example. Recently, within the last year, I was late to a client session. A few minutes late. I miscommunication on schedules. I was a few minutes late, and I started just bashing myself. Like, this is so unprofessional. How could you do this? And I was like, hold on a second. Let's take a
Mhm.
breath. Wait, you're human.
Yeah,
Mistakes happen. This is okay. And
yeah,
at the end of the day, Mike, we laughed about it and had the session, and it was great. And it was like just noticing how I was talking to myself in that
yeah,
moment, really being that inner asshole. And it's like,
yeah.
wait, what would the ally say?
Ooh, I love this. Okay, so if you want to make friends, start by number one, noticing your ally and your asshole. I call the ally the
Yeah.
inner beloved, but I love it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, and
Yeah.
and I totally, yeah, I might even go a little stronger sometimes than asshole. But yes, whatever that is, that we're and that I love this. Notice your tone.
Notice your
Take
tone.
take a pause for a second. When
Mhm.
you're in it, it's harder to do it, but if you can, just you don't have to stop it, is what I hear you saying, but just like,
Yeah.
okay, take a break for a second and then notice your tone, and it's like, "All right, time out here."
Yes.
Right? And that is a way, again, once we have the awareness around it, you're not going to change anything by not at least bringing first the awareness to say, hey,
Yeah.
this is what is happening. So often, I think sometimes I'm like, this isn't even, whose voice is this? The inner asshole. Because this isn't even mine. This is my mother and my father and my grandparents and whoever else that told me I was overweight and I couldn't eat that. And there were rules to all, like, this isn't
Yes.
even me. This is like me
Yes.
kind of channeling whatever those voices are. So I even love to just say, does this even belong to me, first of all? Because if
Great
it
question.
doesn't, I think sometimes it's even easier to recognize that when you take the pause.
Oh, totally. And I think it can be helpful too to notice the volume in which, because
Mm.
the inner asshole is always real loud
Yeah.
versus that ally can sometimes be a little softer. At least for me, it's a
Yeah.
softer tone. It's a calming tone. And so
Yep.
when you're so used to listening to that asshole,
Yeah.
that may not even be you, it seems to take over. But if again, hitting that pause button on yourself, and to your point, you may not stop yourself in the moment, but even if you can reflect back and
Mhm.
just kind of look and say, okay, how did that go? How did I treat myself? How did I talk to myself? What
Yeah.
could I do different next time?
Yeah. And I like this, like, let's make it simple because to me, everything about just daily practices, I don't want people to feel like, oh my gosh, now I have to have this whole long conversation. And not, we're not saying, you're not saying that, I'm not saying that, but it's like, let's just, yeah, like sometimes I just kind of notice like where have I been really kind to myself today? Where are
Mhm.
places where it's like, and a lot of times, I don't know if you find this too, I find certain situations like what you said about like coaching with a client because I do want to do well for clients. So sometimes it's like the more of a situation has some pressure or expectation around it, the louder. I always think too, like, like it could also be in all caps. Like you ever get an email where it's
Yeah.
like, it's
Yeah.
like they're either yelling at you or they're all caps. And again, that to me can also just break some of the intensity. And like I can laugh. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're getting at me with all caps again. All right,
Yes.
let's just have a moment to laugh about this for a second.
Totally.
Yeah.
Another thing that was really helpful. So just going back, yes, we start off
Yeah.
talking about food, but then we also start looking at, because one thing that was really helpful for me
Mhm.
was spending some time really appreciating all the different parts of my body. Like,
Mm.
so I was always so focused on the things I wanted to change and the things that I wasn't happy with. And listen, I'm human. I've been on this journey for a long time. There are still parts that I'm working on, right?
Sure, sure, sure.
But when I started to look at everything that my body does for me on a daily basis, I mean, I'm
Mm.
talking organs,
Yeah.
my
I
heart
like it.
beating.
Cells. Like, let's get all the blood that's traveling through your veins right now. I love it. I love.
Yes. The eyes that help me see, I'll never forget. So my arms are one of those areas that I always felt a lot of shame about
Mm.
prior to doing this work.
Mhm.
And I'll never forget finding ways to appreciate my arms because it was such a
Mm.
sensitive subject for me.
Mhm.
And when I started to think about, well, my arms, my kids were little when I started doing this work, right? And so I would think, well, my arms, they hug my babies,
Mm.
right? They help me open doors.
Yeah,
They help me prepare the meals.
I
They
love it.
help me do so, I mean, when you think about what your arms do for you in a day. And
Absolutely.
so when I started to kind of look at this like alternate reality, because I
Yeah,
was in this
that's
like, oh,
existing parallel to the one that we are living in that feels
yeah.
like shit. Yes. Mhm.
Yes. And I was
Mhm.
like, wow, they really do a lot for me. Perhaps it's time to show them a little bit of love.
Mm.
And I started doing that with every part of my body, just all the things that I could think of, because and I'm sure there's a lot that I missed because there's so much that goes on in our
Yeah.
human form, right? But started looking at it through that lens, a lens of like care and appreciation, and like, wow, look at all these parts and what they do for me. Maybe it's time to give them a little bit of
Yeah.
like self-love.
And you know, it's interesting too. I've done similar things like that, and I've even done something. So I have some scars from some surgeries, and
Mm,
I did that was like my least favorite part of my body, these scars, and I was having a hard time finding appreciation for them in that
yeah.
moment. And so something else, if you're listening, and this is something I practice too, is I let the body part talk to me.
Oh,
So I might say, and I did this, and oh my gosh, I cried and sobbed when I did
yeah.
this. What do the scars want to tell me? And the scars wanted to say, again, we're part of your journey. We are part of this transformation. We are physical reminders of all the things that you've gone through in this planet that have, made you who you are in this moment. And as I wrote it as a letter to myself, but you don't have
Mhm.
to do it that way. But as I started to do that, because I couldn't see it, but when I started to kind of be in the body part and allow the body part to speak, I was like, oh, it totally changed my relationship with scars. Not to say, to your point, we're all human, but
Yeah.
generally speaking, I'm like, damn, those are some pretty badass scars because again, they have everything that we've gone through, everything our bodies have done for us have brought us to this moment. So it's a radical shifting of instead of being so critical and we need to fit, we like our bodies are these, projects and everything we've been taught and then reinforced and all of that. Again, coming back into just small baby steps of kindness and compassion to ourselves, it really is a radical revolutionary practice. It
Oh,
doesn't sound
totally.
like it, but if you've never done this and you're listening, start doing it and you'll start to see how it absolutely can change just your relationship with yourself.
Oh, totally. You made me think of my scar from breast cancer because I
Mm.
had a lumpectomy, and that was also right. And so when I
Yeah.
started, I didn't do the talk to me. I didn't. I love that. I love that little.
Yeah,
I might try that exercise. Um,
totally, totally.
but
Borrow it, all of it.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
the day I shifted and realized like, wow, this scar represents,
mm,
what I've gone through on this particular journey,
yeah,
and started to see it through this whole different lens. I talk a lot about in like lenses, like looking through a
yeah,
different lens, right? But seeing it through this different lens of like that strength,
yeah, yeah.
and just feeling so differently about it. And now I look at it and I don't really think about it that much anymore. But at the time I would look at it and be like, oh, that's pretty amazing that I went through that.
And I think so, like, to me, what I hear you saying is we have this kind of narrative. We've been in this kind of asshole mindset that we've all been taught one way or the other, reinforced all of it. It's a
Yeah.
gazillion-dollar industry to kind of keep us off our feet.
Mhm.
And to me, what I hear you saying is it's like come back to yourself, create some pause to have some awareness about what your relationship even looks like, and then like spend some time with yourself, like spend some time with your eyeballs and your earlobes and the different parts of you, right? I mean, there's a lot of amazing parts of my body that, to your point, we kind of overlook on a
Mhm.
regular basis because we're so focused on the things we don't like. That's what gets our attention. Oh, I
Yeah.
can't wear sleeveless this summer because I posted something on Facebook not that long ago because I have a lot of loose skin from losing lots of weight. And it's
Yeah.
like, it hangs. And I was like, it hangs. Okay. I've made peace with it. I'm
Yeah.
not going to not wear a sleeveless shirt because somebody said, "Hey, you can't do that if you have arms like." Guess what? My body, my rules. It
Mhm.
really does start to once you start to make those small steps, you will feel, I think, at least I felt braver and braver to even be with the parts that were the hardest for me to embrace. And like, I don't know if I'd start there. That I probably didn't start there at the beginning. I started at places where it's like, what do I love already?
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
already amazing that I don't have to, we're not asking in this conversation for people to convince themselves. It's just, are you willing? Another friend of mine who was on the podcast who asked a great question. Are you willing to see this differently? Are you willing to be in relationship with your body, with food, with movement differently than you have? Because if it's not working and you're feeling, crappy all summer because you're trying to cover up, that's what I spent years not wearing a bathing suit. I'd be in long sleeves. I'd be sweating my ass off in summer because I was like, oh, I can't let people see this. It's, whatever. If that is the space, are we willing to try something and experiment and be playful with it to see, again, what else is out there, that ally, that inner beloved, that part of us, again, that's so compassionate, generally speaking, to other people.
Yeah.
How do we turn that inward toward our own selves?
Absolutely. I always think of the Care Bears. Remember the Care Bears from like the 1980s?
Yes. My husband's nickname is Care Bear, which if he's listening, maybe should I edit that out? No, I'm gonna keep that in. Anyway, so I'm all familiar with the Care Bears. Yeah, go ahead.
they shine their lights, right? To the love or the what. And I'm like, just you're in your Care Bear. Turn it on to you.
Flip it.
Flip it.
Yeah.
Shine that onto you.
So if you were saying, okay, again, summer's coming, and I was getting propositioned last week or the week before, do you want to lose 30 pounds or 10 pounds before? I was like, do you know who I am? Because no, that answer is no. But we get it even more inundated. What do you, how do you practice when you're getting those messages even stronger this time of year? What do you do to help kind of ground yourself and kind of shut out that noise?
Yeah, it's like January in summertime.
Yeah.
So
if your body ain't good, it really ain't good in those months.
I mean, now I laugh at a lot of them because I think because what we do, like, I know for me that my like news feed fills up with that on social media because it's a lot of what I talk about, right?
Yeah. So they're like, oh, Amy wants to hear all about what to do.
Don't want that. So I tend to like, I'm just like, okay, another thing. But what I learned a long time ago is I know what's best for me and my body. I know what works for me and my body. I know what foods feel best. I know how often, like what works for me as far as like how often I eat, what I eat, when I eat, all that stuff. That's what I help my clients see for themselves, as opposed to listening to someone outside of you. It's kind of like listening to the inner asshole, right?
It just is projected out on a loudspeaker out in the backyard.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. I love it. I'm never gonna get those images out of my mind.
And so I just now when I see them, I'm like, oh yeah, here we go again. It's typical. This is what they do. This is what happens. And listen, I'm a firm believer that every person must find what works for them. 100%. But when you are listening to someone outside of yourself tell you what to do, like that's not helping create the confidence inside.
Yeah. I love this. I'm going to just kind of like hone in on one thing that you said that I feel like is so super, like if you get nothing else, I know what's best for me, because that's how you create a life of enchantment in all the regards. And to me, why I focus so much on body stuff on this podcast and just in my work in general is because we're so focused on trying to fix whatever these perceived flaws are. We are too busy or too exhausted to actually live the life we want and the enchantment and all of that. So to me, if we don't walk through this and really address how to recreate these relationships with ourselves, we're going to spin a lot in a hamster wheel, because we're going to be so focused on listening to that. The asshole is going to be like, we're just going to have the front row. We're going to have the tickets right in the front going, oh, tell me what I need to do. But I know it's best for me.
Yeah.
It's like, and I probably didn't believe that for a really long time. And there are days probably where I might still be in a moment of like, do I really know what's best for me? However, like just wherever you are right now in this moment, if you don't necessarily trust, and again, there's a lot of reasons why that could be, it's being open to the possibility that I do. So sometimes I would just be like, I'm open to the possibility that I know better than whatever this is. And to your point, I think laughter, a little like, oh, here we go again, right?
Mhm.
So we don't get sucked in. We just go, ah, I know what that is now. I know what that voice is. I know all of those things. And I know it's like it's almost like if I ate that metaphorically, it would be like if I sat down and ate 3 bags of Oreos. Like everybody goes, oh, if I could eat what I want, I would. I was like, well, actually, you probably wouldn't because you feel like shit if you
Yes.
I know I've overeaten. I'm like, I don't feel good. So
Mhm.
it's like I can go down that path if I want to. I know what happens. It's like overeating or over whatever, and I don't feel good. So it's saying I have the power to re-choose every time. It's whether I listen to the ally, whether I get kind of caught up in all the other mean things, and I just shift again. I just take a moment of compassion, go, we're human. Of course, we're going to be on this planet practicing this. And I just come back to, how can I be kinder to myself in this moment?
Yes.
And I think, I don't know about you, but I have a feeling body has so much wisdom, insight,
Mhm.
soul knowledge that I have found that part of just like my own journey with enchant, you can't skip over the body. You
No.
can't skip over, and we didn't talk about this time, so maybe I'll have to come back, Amy, and talk about emotions, right? Because I also
Oh, yeah.
think that part of, like you said at the beginning, our relationship with food is because we were taught to bypass how we really felt, to be in our own integrity and truth. And we didn't know how. My generation, particularly in my family, knows nothing about how to actually be an emotion. So my whole family all around used food and other things to absolutely just keep going because it felt so uncomfortable, but it was like, okay, this was the lube that helped me keep going rather than
Mhm.
completely fall apart because nobody ever taught me that that was okay to do. And so I think that I don't know exactly where I was going with that, but I think all of this again is so related
Mhm.
to again, if you want a life that has more freedom, more peace, right? You're helping women particularly find more peace. It's like this is the way, and sometimes it's a little unpeaceful in the process,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's okay. Like that is okay. It doesn't mean we're doing it wrong, and it doesn't mean you're not going to renegotiate this relationship with your body. It just means, you know what? There's some processing here of again, allowing ourselves to see and be in this differently than we have for, I mean, gosh, I'm 48 years old walking the planet. And this
Mhm.
stuff has been indoctrinated into me,
Oh, yeah.
definitely younger than, I know you mentioned 8 to like 13, but I swear I think it was like, I probably was like a baby and my family was already thinking about, is she overweight, which is craziness.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I'm 47, so, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're
We're
of the
walking,
same
we're walking
time.
it.
But it's like this radical I always think of it, it's like this radical shift, because it got to a point with me where I was like, I do not want to do another diet. I do not want to do I want to there's got to be a different way. There's got to be a different way
Yeah.
to do this where I can find some peace with myself and with food.
Yeah.
And that was my quest. I'm like, yeah, it was messy in the beginning. It still
Yeah.
is.
Well,
Like
hey,
there's like
that's being a human.
it's being a human. And I'm always like having ahas and insight and learning something new.
Yes,
And it just continues to enhance the journey. Right.
I'm
And I'm
with you.
like,
I'm so with
yeah.
you.
But it's like a radical shift
It
from
is.
the
A and
diet.
and I think you make a really good point there too, because, if diets brought us peace and contentment and happiness, we wouldn't have spent, I don't know, God, 8, 40, what, I mean, I haven't been on a diet in a long time, but we wouldn't be in the place. So it's like when we can step back and look at the data and be like, if this actually worked, no,
Yeah.
it its intention isn't for it to work. It's to sell us and keep us, again,
Mhm.
busy on whatever this is. So if we can realize that and say to your, this is this beautiful question. I'm so open to discovering that maybe there's one way for you, one way for me, different, but there are other ways, because the right way for me, and I kind of loosely say right way,
Yeah.
would not cause this much exhaustion, suffering, like you cannot mean your way, asshole your way into a thin bot, right? Like, or whatever this is. And I
Yeah.
think that model, we have to be willing to say, yeah, I'm willing to try something different.
Something different.
And let it, and like I said, and like you said, let it be a little messy, because it will be.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do all of this summer. Like, if this is like, again, you're just tiptoeing into this idea of this, I think just starting, and tell me what you think, Amy, but I think just a daily practice. How could you just say one kind thing to yourself? Or how could you be like just one small, to your point, baby turtle step around, just instead of trying to take things away, I can't eat that, or I shouldn't do that. It's like, what can you add in that feels more nurturing? How do you turn up the volume? Like you said, the ally is usually quieter. So you turn her up a couple decibels.
Yeah.
What does that look like as a daily practice? I don't know. Tell me what you think, but that's kind of what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I love that I offer is, homework for some of my clients is, for every insult you offer, you've got to offer a compliment. Or you've got, for every, asshole statement, you got to find an ally statement. Right.
Wow.
So it's got to be an equal trade. Like, get to that place where you're at least starting to offer some ally statements to yourself and say some kinder things. That's a great way. Another thing that one of the very first things I did back in probably 2016 was a 30-day body appreciation journal. And so for every day for 30 days, I listed one part of my body that I appreciated and why. Just one. And if I got stuck, I could repeat it.
Yeah.
But just
You
listing
don't make
every
it
day.
overcomplicate it. Yeah.
Yeah, don't overcomplicate it. But once you start thinking of, like you said, the blood and the organs and all the different things, the earlobes, like there's the fingers, there's so many different parts. And so for 30 days, listed one thing I appreciated and why. And at the end of that 30-day, and it might have taken me a little longer than 30 days, but by the end of it, I was like, oh, there's a lot more to love.
Oh, I love this. There's a lot more to love. This is beautiful. Okay. This is absolutely beautiful. So as we close, I love this kind of closing. It's like being open to, there's a lot more of you to love. And we've only really just cracked a little bit of it. And so again, this is the path to enchantment. This is a path to making peace and finding free. Like, this is the way, however you create that, to discovering that there is so much more to love. I love that. It feels so expansive to me, the way you put that. It's like, ooh, yeah, I'm gonna lay on the beach in all of my ness and just be like, hey, did you realize how much there is of me to love? I mean, I kind of walk around sometimes and play like that anyway. So now I'm just gonna expand that even more. So Amy, if you see me out anywhere out and about on the East Coast this summer, you'll be like, he's taking my simple strategies and putting them into practice.
I love it.
All right. So if the beautiful listeners want to get connected with you, engage you, hire you, whatever, all the things that they might want to do with you, Amy, where do you want to send them?
Okay. Well, you can always go to my website, fattofierce.com. And if you're on Facebook, go to my Facebook group, Fat to Fierce.
Yes.
And that's probably, if you go to my website, you can always book a consult. You can also email me at amy@amyenglishcc.com. So
all right, sweet. And we will put all of those links and names, so you don't have to memorize everything, in the show notes, so you can easily get it. But thank you so much for being a guest today. If you want to talk about this more, because this is a hot topic for me and a lot of other people, come on over to my Facebook group, Everyday Enchantment. We are having this conversation all summer. Again, not to feel crappy about ourselves, but to be in this space of more love rather than and less asshole. I love this. This feels like a bumper sticker for me. Something that's coming.
I
as
love
a
it.
little summer tagline. Thank you, Amy, so much for all your wisdom and insights. Always fun to laugh and jam with you on any of these topics. So, again, I hope all the listeners have a beautiful day. And until we meet again, just enjoy and find that place where, again, you can turn up that inner ally and have some fun with yourself. That's it for now, loves. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. Get all the juicy details and links we've mentioned in the show notes. If learning more about how you can use your own enchantment to live a oh hell yes life, come get your own coaching session with me by going to staceyandon.com and signing up for my homepage. And as always, come chat with me about this topic and all things enchantment in my Facebook group, Everyday Enchantment. See you on the flip side.